Prime Minister Mark Carney and Alberta Premier Danielle Smith could be close to a deal on the future of Alberta's energy sector. And sources tell CBC News it may help pave the way for a new oil pipeline. CBC News has confirmed reporting by the Globe and Mail that as part of a deal with Alberta, the federal government may allow exemptions to a tanker ban on BC's north coast. That ban has been a roadblock to any new oil pipelines that reach the Pacific Ocean. Another major roadblock, BC's Premier is a vocal opponent, and Liberal MPs from the province say it's a hard sell.
It's going to have provincial buy-in and Indigenous support.
They're going to need to ensure that there's actually a proponent for this. I have not heard a private sector proponent.
A government official tells CBC News that Prime Minister Carney is open to a new pipeline if Alberta conducts Indigenous consultation and negotiates with the BC government. For more on a potential BC oil pipeline, Dennis McConaghy joins us now. He's a former energy executive at TransCanada Corporation and the author of several books on pipelines in Canada, and he's in Calgary. Good morning.
Good morning.
So, Dennis, we know a little bit about what is likely in this memorandum of understanding and likely to include exemptions, as we say, to this tanker ban, limited exemptions, getting rid of the emissions cap, Alberta getting on board with industrial carbon pricing, and the oil sector agreeing to this carbon capture pathways plus program, capturing that carbon, sequestering it. So do you think, from your perspective, from within the sector, there is appetite among Canadian oil companies to take all of this on?
Well, I think there's one point to really emphasize here. There are opportunities to expand other pipeline systems, either TMX, which is going to the Lower Mainland, the existing Enbridge, or even the existing Keystone systems. Those expansions, which means we're going to put incremental oil sands production into them, really require the adjustments that you alluded to, like removing the risk of emission caps, the risk of some decarbonization mandate. So those are two of the three things that were reported. If you don't go to either Kitimat or Prince Rupert, you don't really need to worry about the tanker ban. But obviously, if people are really wanting a massive expansion on the order of 1 million barrels a day of new capacity, then you're talking about a pipeline to either of those two ports. And for that, you do need to, quote, carve out the tanker ban for the purposes of such a pipeline. My own view is that there's still a lot of details to be understood in whether or not this MOU can get home. But certainly what was reported is essentially, I think, quite favorable to the Alberta interests, but very much the devil is in the details, which we have yet to see.
And a lot of the details will be of interest to specifically those in BC. We know BC Premier David Eby has strongly opposed the construction of a pipeline. We know we've heard Indigenous groups, most, not all, have spoken out against this. What do you think about the challenges ahead in terms of trying to move this forward? How difficult do you think it's going to be if we were to go that route?
Well, let's just remember, it's really the oil sands producers who are going to take the fundamental financial risk of supporting any incremental pipeline capacity. Now, if they were prepared to actually sign agreements with a pipeline development company for a pipe to either Kitimat or Prince Rupert, and would demonstrate that they're prepared to take on the financial risks of that project, then it's a pretty black and white situation where is the Carney government prepared to assert federal jurisdiction, because it will be federal jurisdiction, that would enable them to carve out the tanker ban from such a proposal. And it would really go as to whether or not they thought the economic value to Canada, which I think is considerable, if it were to proceed on those terms, they would have to make that decision. But they do have federal jurisdiction here ultimately in place. Whether or not that's politically palatable to them or not, another question. As for First Nations, most of the experience is that most First Nations, when they are actually confronted with an economically viable project, will make consensual benefit agreements with them. And I would have some confidence that that ultimately would prevail on any of these various expansions. That's not to say there would not be some holdouts, but again, the obligation is that they have to be consulted and their concerns taken into account. They don't have an absolute veto. So again, the Carney government is going to have to ultimately weigh if in fact the private sector is willing to actually support. And by the private sector, I'm really talking about those 4 or 5 major oil sands producers that will be the fundamental economic underpinning of that kind of a pipeline project.
And we know that the Carney government has said that that consultation must happen, although there is, as you say, no veto. I just want to go back to the cost-benefit analysis of something like this. We know the Trans Mountain expansion cost a lot of taxpayer money, but it did end up being very profitable. I think it's something like $568 million in earnings in the first 3 months of the year. You know, when you look at the expense of the project, the time it would take to get it off the ground, the possible environmental impacts, you do a little bit of a cost-benefit analysis for us. A pipeline like this, would it be worth all of this?
Well, that will be absolutely proven as to whether or not those 5 oil sands producers are prepared to put their financial commitment behind it. But just to give you a sense of it, yes, today Canada derives an enormous amount of economic value from its oil exports. If you imagine that the cost structure of incremental oil production is at or below $40 a barrel, and the cost of a new pipeline would be somewhere in the range of $8 to $10 a barrel, and you have a world price of oil at 60, you can just do the simple arithmetic. There's a lot of value to be captured, and that's, I think, fundamentally obvious to everyone, even the Carney government. The question is, how can that value be reconciled really with their, long-standing climate ambitions? But again, this is in the context of a country that has suffered from almost zero GDP growth the last 10 years. So, I mean, that's really the ultimate decision that is being played out in these negotiations around this MOU.
Author Dennis McConaghy, will have to leave it there, but thank you very much for breaking this down for us today.
Thank you.